Welcome to the Get Up and Scale podcast. We're joined live by Travis. Sorry.
This is why we have Brett do the intros, because it's just awkwardly great.
But
we're also not live.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Get Up and Scale podcast. We're here with Travis Vaughan here at Arival, and we just wanted to start off, man, by thanking you for joining us. And we wanted to start by asking you for an introduction about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yes.
My name's Travis Vaughan. I am a co-founder and CEO of TourBase. And basically what we are is a company that has made online travel agencies, OTAs, accessible to the masses. And so what we're doing is we're finding entrepreneurs and we're finding tour operators who want to basically launch and run an OTA for cool tours and activities in their region.
Cool. And what's an OTA?
So an
For
OTA,
those that don't know.
Yeah, an online travel agency. A lot of people would know, a Priceline or a Kayak or an Expedia is kind of the typical OTA that you use to have a one-stop shop to book, your flights, your rental cars, your activities. And what we're doing is just keeping that purely on the fun things to do.
Nice.
Wow. And you're allowing operators to create them themselves?
Yeah, so what we do is, we heard from so many different operators that working with OTAs is sort of a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
It can be, it's needed because OTAs drive a lot of volume to these operators who otherwise wouldn't be able to get the volume that they need to run a successful business. But it also can be a real challenge because they take a pretty good size commission from their operations. And so it's this sort of love-hate relationship. And so we thought our background was in running an OTA and still is up in Alaska. We thought, well, let's take this tech and everything we've done and bring it to tour operators to actually just become their own OTA.
Kai, I have to mention this. This is sounding a lot like you would have liked this when you were talking about RaleighTours.com.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. I think a lot of tour operators have had that idea, right? When you build up a network in your local area and you start referring your customers to other businesses, then you start paying referral fees to each other. I think a lot of people get this idea of, hey, what if I make this a business and then create a website? I think organically, that's probably how a lot of OTAs start, maybe. How did you guys get started with this idea?
So our other co-founder, Drew, who's now our chief technology officer, he got going up in Alaska. And what started as being a tour guide turned into becoming a director of marketing, turned into starting to build websites for all these various tour companies up in Alaska that were primarily serving cruise guests. So people would come off their ship, they go do the excursion and head out and say, for doing these websites, you thought, I could actually do this a lot better myself, and maybe I just become the one-stop shop and then send these bookings out to the tour companies. And so that's what started, the company's called Alaska Shore Tours, and he's still in business today and doing well. And it was really starting there and building the tech, all the different integrations to many of the ResTech systems, the back-end software as well as the front-end websites that model started to emerge, and he thought, well, let's take this and make it bigger. But we didn't want to just try to become a massive OTA. We decided to take a very different approach because what makes Alaska Shore Tours unique is that it was born out of Alaska. It was born out of knowing these tours. It was born out of knowing the tour operators personally, and people really like that. And so how do we do that and replicate and scale globally in a way that maintains that personal connection, like truly knowing that the location you're at and truly curating the very best stuff. So that's why we chose this franchise model to try to scale, but also keeping that local curation feel.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So what's the scope of where it is now compared to a few years ago? Like how many, if you can share, how many clients or how many customers are on tour? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. We are in about 15 different locations right now in terms of where you can go and find a tour-based experience.
So 15 franchises?
No, some of those are corporate, many of those are corporately owned.
Okay.
So we've done a combination of both launching different markets ourselves so we can say, hey, let's replicate this model that works in Alaska, but we need to sort of eat our own dog food, as they say, and do this in other markets. And so that's anything from, I live in Whitefish, Montana. Glacier TourBase is one of the markets that we're doing. And then we've also launched a number down in the Caribbean. Belize and Jamaica and Cancun are all places where, particularly the cruise market, has the direct play down there as well. 2 franchisees. So our first was a woman named Nikki, who's a fly fishing guide in Jackson Hole. So she's been on board for a couple of years now, running Jackson Hole TourBase. We have Kelly, who is our most recent one in Telluride, and now Durango. So really kind of down the Mountain West has been an area where we've gotten our first couple of franchisees. And we, in terms of just kind of the general volume and where we're at, we, as a collective, we send about 50,000 guests out on tour last year. So we're starting to get some traction and be able to do a bit of volume through there. And you certainly have a long ways to go before TourBase is a known name and people can go to a lot of different destinations. But that's where we're at. Yeah.
And what are the franchisees like getting, like in Jackson Hole? She signs up. I assume a lot of it is the technology, right, and the onboarding and the training and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The front-end website is a really big piece of it, right? We've poured a lot of money into creating a really good user experience, and it's mobile first, video first, all of these things. So that front-end website's a big piece. Then on the back end of it, we've built the whole tech stack, kind of top to bottom ourselves, and so that has your CRM to manage all of your customers and the tickets and the relationships, and then also those APIs that go out to the different res tech systems, because what we don't want to do is just make more manual work for tour operators, more manual work for another, basically be a travel agent. And so it's the stuff that pulls in all that real-time inventory, so that when people book on the site, it gets pushed out effectively to, people like you, so that you've got the booking, you've got the information, and it's a really clean experience. So front end, back end tech, and then just a lot of it is the support and the training and the processes that we have learned work around. Content strategy and SEO, and then we give a lot of that support too, of that marketing support, and helping them to try to grow and become a successful business in a fairly quickly evolving market.
Yeah, why did you decide franchising instead of let me just keep opening more myself?
Yeah, that kind of comes back to that Alaska story of two things. One is I think that we believe having that locally owned aspect is going to turn into a better end product. A couple different ways. One, you can go out and you can have lunch and shake hands and get to know the local operators that you want to bring onto your platform.
Greg Fisher's in each city, basically, right? Like with Waiver.
Our water sports guy,
TripShock.
Yes. So, and we can't do that at scale, right? We can certainly, we've in the Caribbean a little bit, we've done that where it's kind of fake it till you make it, where you can read reviews and you can pick up the phone, you can email and have a call with anyone, and we get them on board. That's not difficult, but to truly know them and curate the best, that takes some local connection, especially if you're in a market where there's not a huge presence of OTAs. Like that's, for a lot of places in smaller markets, that's not a regular part of how tour operators sell yet. So being able to have those personal connections is huge, of getting supply onto our sites that, like Glacier would be a good example, that Viator and Get Your Guide would like to have but don't, because there's nobody in market to be able to go rub shoulders with people and convince them that this is actually a good thing for their business.
So I'm curious on the barrier to entry. So if I'm an operator, I have a business or even 3 businesses in the same area, and I know I have friends that are business owners, like they have local experiences. Is there like a minimum amount of, I guess, supply that you would expect them to have to start one of these sites, or is like 5 to 10 businesses enough?
Yeah, 5 to 10 businesses is enough. And we help in that first 3 months of basically getting that website up, live, content. By the time they're ready to go, it's leads flowing in and turnkey. I think that I sort of think about that kind of 15 different tour experiences as kind of a nice like minimum sweet spot to say there's some variety here. It's not just like you can go fishing or sailing and hope that you like those two things. It's like, hey, this is a pretty good swath of the main things to do in the area, and you can usually fulfill that with, for sure, 5 to 10 partnerships would be more than enough usually to get 15, 20 good experiences.
And do customers book more than one from those sites often?
Yeah, absolutely, and it depends. A lot of times you get people who just like, I know what I want. I found you. I want to go rafting. Let's book it. Great. We're happy to take that. I think, obviously, from our perspective, it's a lot better if they are booking multiple things, and we do see that a lot. I don't have the exact number, but if I just had to sort of shoot from the hip, I'd say maybe a quarter, 20, 25% of guests are booking multiple activities, and that's really where, especially the cruise markets, is of course a great spot for that, because people are usually stopping 2, 3, 4 different spots for their cruise excursions, and it's sort of if you're not going through the cruise line, it's painful to go out and research and book every single one of those, either whether it's through OTAs or it's through individual operators across every single different market. So that one-stop shop for you plug in your cruise itinerary into the website, there you go, every single port, here's what's available for you.
Wow.
That's probably where the best use case is for what we're doing.
It sounds like for the past couple of years, you spent a lot of time like working on the technology aspect, right? Like kind of building it out and getting it ready for the franchisees. What does franchise development look like for you guys? How are you going to find the franchisees? Kind of what's the vision of what this looks like over the next 2 to 3 years to grow TourBase?
Good question. I think we're in the midst of figuring that out. But I mean, honestly, why we're
too.
here? Why?
We all are. Yeah.
Yeah, why we're here? Arival. So one of our hypotheses is that tour operators will be a really good potential franchisee candidate. They've got relationships with other tour operators. They've got a reservations team in place. Are there ambitious folks out there that want to go from just selling the one thing to all of a sudden they're now selling everything? And so as people come into their market and they're buying the big attractions, big high volume activities, they're grabbing them. They're selling that thing and making 20, 25% on it, and then they can cross-sell it back to their own.
What's the
AT&T
response been like from these I think it's a really interesting idea. It's a very also innovative way to use the franchise model.
Yeah.
Like I like that, and I agree that these regional OTAs, when there's a lot of that hand squeezing and local networking is really successful. I think of Greg Fisher and TripShock, right? It seems to be a good business model. What's the response been so far when you're talking to people? What are the challenges to getting people to commit to the franchise?
I think that one of the big challenges has just been capacity, right? To be honest, a lot of tour operators out there are trying to keep your head above water, trying to make money. There's so many different ways you can put your time and energy, and so then you look at this thing that's like, okay, this is not going to necessarily just make my life simpler and easier, faster, better, whatever. It's not just like an AI solution for your customer service. It's like, hey, this is a whole other business, and they have to be ready to bite that off or have a team that can help. And it's honestly not a crazy amount of work. People can do it as a part-time job, especially for the first year or two. But that's a big barrier.
I was gonna say, what if the tour operator isn't the best franchisee for this? You know what I mean? Like maybe because of that reason. Like I'm just thinking like the factor here that I think plays the biggest role in their success would be their level of connections within the market, right? Knowing the existing tour operators are being ingrained in the community. Because I'm wondering if there's a different persona out there. Maybe maybe there's a different sort of person that knows a lot of tour operators, but maybe doesn't own them or something, or they're staff members.
Local blogger,
That's actually definitely a second sort of thought we've had is because that content creation is the other huge value of having someone locally.
Yes.
Right, being able to go out on the tour, take video, take good photos, write up the blog of the top 8 things I did. Whatever it is, written content, video content. That's all.
Like local newspapers almost, like existing businesses. So there's this program called Save 30 that's in the Southeast. And it's basically kind of like Groupon, but they're like a discounting service. And it's a franchise, but they sold a lot to radio stations. Okay. And the radio stations are running the Save 30 platform, and they're using their radio station to advertise it. There's just an interesting ideas. Local papers or city dailies or even radio stations might have those sort of connections, and they might have the ability to build a platform and drive traffic to it. Just an idea that popped in my head.
That's cool.
Yeah, because the Save 30 would be a good case study on something like that, where the radio stations ran with a platform, which I think is a license or a franchise, that kind of copied Groupon. I don't know if it's still around, but I know it was fairly successful, and the radio station seemed really interested because they have that audience base that they can kind of draw from. But just an interesting idea. My concern is that tour operators are very busy, and the more successful they are, probably the more, the less time they have, maybe. But you said you have the guy, like with the 2 franchisees you have, you think they've been able to handle it, like in Whitefish and the other place?
They're definitely able to handle the workload and the capacity. They're not coming from a traditional tour operator background. One is a fly fishing guide, and the other grew up in the sports industry doing sports retail, ski boots and ski boot fitting and things like that. So they're not necessarily people who are running their current tour operation and growing their tour-based business alongside of it. So it's kind of a new, I think there's a really strong case to be made for it. I'm hopeful that we'll get folks who are excited to sign up with us this year from the tour world, but I think it's not like we're wanting to put all the eggs in that basket either. We're still trying to figure out that
someone
ICP.
like me and you, if we have this idea of doing it ourselves, it would probably be so much easier if someone's already doing it to just be like, hey, can you just help me with this and we'll make it work faster.
I'm almost like, though, with a franchisor even, the ability to build a marketplace that's not regional but more like concept specific could be interesting too.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a tour scale, like a way of like promoting all of our tour scale products. And it's like a reseller, but it's like the franchisor is the entity that's actually reselling to the client.
Yeah.
There's something interesting there.
Yeah, like I have like a Springs in Florida website that I resell our Springs tours on. Kind of like that idea.
Do you just drag the peak or no?
The Fair Harbor stuff, yeah.
You're not a peaker.
The items in. Careful.
Don't use that word.
We just put our own items on there and
That's
resell
great,
them.
but that's a huge step in the right direction, what you're doing. And what Kai mentioned about the niche aspect of it, like do you have people that want to just focus on one specific product that might be a bigger area, but it's like super defined?
There's been a couple of the good conversations we've been having here over the last 24 hours is somebody who's sort of like, I run a hot air balloon company. I want to become the what if I become the ballooning person all across the U.S. and the ballooning TourBase or something like that.
Rather than regional concept-based OTAs.
Exactly. I could see a world where it ends up kind of being, if you sort of think about this, like Matrix, where going this way are all the different regions of people who are doing this regional OTA concept, but then vertically you've got your hot air balloons or your off-road tours or your snowmobile. So it's like people who are super into off-roading everywhere they go, that's what they want to do. Totally. Then they've got the go-to website that
has, almost more traction, or in certain way. Like Robert Mayer of Arizona Party Bike actually tried to do this during COVID. He built partybike.com and barbike.com, and then tried to go out and basically resell party bike tours in all those markets. Wasn't super successful because the pandemic stopped and he went back to focusing on running his tours. But I remember thinking the idea of carving out a niche nationwide for one type of thing and then kind of building a reseller system over it is pretty smart, especially you can grab up like some key SEO terms that is tied in with your website to bring organic traffic especially to these different concepts. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
And I have to still figure out exactly what that looks like to overlay those two.
Because of territory protection.
Versus, you guys being in franchising, it's an important piece of it is how do you protect a territory, but I think that there's got to be a win there where there's some sort of split.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, or if the person who sells it from the vertical position, maybe it's the local person who actually takes on the customer service of that because it's in their territory, and then there's a revenue share or something.
And
I don't
they
know,
can help
but
get the content
but there's got to be something there that
the
can
power
work.
of a franchise network.
So you do websites for each of the locations, or is it just one overarching?
It's a single code base that powers it all. So every different location has full autonomy to curate what type of content do they want to have on there. From
different instance of it, basically.
Yep, but with every improvements that's made to it, then everybody that gets pushed out and everybody gets to reap the benefits of that, rather than having to maintain 20 custom websites.
Yeah.
So they all do have their own website. It's much easier to manage because of that side of things.
Exactly. Yeah. The single code base powers all the different instances, but they're all totally can choose what kind of categories they want, what type of all the customization they want to do.
Yeah. Well, this is a lightning interview. Awesome. We're here at the Arival Conference together. It's our first time doing in person, which is really fun. It's nice to be able to look at Justin in the flesh, deeply into his eyes, and not just be on the computer. But we appreciate. I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer, but really appreciate you jumping down and speaking with us at the conference.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
If people are interested in learning more at TourBase, how do they find you?
TourBase.com, probably the best place to go and find out more about us. And I'm always happy to chat with people and just brainstorm and see if there's a potential there.
Well, thanks, man.
Thank you guys for having me out.
I appreciate it.
Really nice to meet you.
Maybe we can do the song live. You gotta get up. Go.
No, we can pass it. We can pass it. We can pass it.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the invite.
I gotta work, grind. That's just the way it is. I gotta get up, scale, and grow my biz. I gotta scale, grow.